Alrighty, this is DC We the People News. So this is going to be an interesting outside the box thinking process. Alright, I'm not an attorney, not giving legal advice, okay? Educational purposes only. Newsworthy as well. Because this is somewhat a news update of Institute for Justice fighting for $50,000 that the federal government took from a corporation. Okay. All right. So we haven't heard this from Institute from Justice. I have not looked up the case or anything. And Leto's Law hasn't brought this up yet, as far as I'm aware of. All right. But he's a strong supporter of it, so I'm assuming if they was going to give him information, they would have told him about it. But usually they don't tell him anything unless there's a win. And I thought, well, this is going to be interesting. So it's going to be a two-part video because her video is 19 minutes, but we need direct timelines and, clarity on this. Okay? Is money your property? Well, no. It's not. It was your time and labor was your property. And they just send you banknotes and say, we'll pay you later. And then you use that same banknotes, and then you tell your house payment, we'll pay you later. So everybody's paying one another later. It's an IOU note. All right, I owe you. And for the rest of my life, I'm going to be in debt with you. Meanwhile, the top bankers up there are laughing at us. Thank you, 1933 Bankruptcy Act. Just saying. Bankruptcy. All right, let's go.
There are carvings in the walls.
All right, so this is Truth Stream Media. All right, that's why I'm not back.
Above windows that say things like, where law is.
Come on.
If you've ever been to the...
All right. I don't know if that's the full name. Let's see here. Yeah. All right, so that is the full name. Okay. And there's, I guess, how you can subscribe to her.
Department of Justice building in Washington, D.C., then you know that it is like a temple. There are carvings in the walls above windows that say things like, where law ends, tyranny begins. Above the massive doors on this temple, it says, the place of justice is a hallowed place. Hallowed, sanctified, consecrated, venerated, sacrosanct. Hallow is defined as to make holy, to set apart for holy or religious use, to consecrate, to treat or keep as sacred, to reverence. Some very high language being employed.
So that being said, why do you think some people out there say, well, going to court is a religious thing?
So it's incredibly hypocritical to an almost asinine level for people whose agency is housed in this building to blatantly ignore the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Supreme Court's rulings, and to play legal semantics games to bureaucratically abuse the law, to ignore Americans' inherent rights to due process, to try and steal their money for the government. So I just want to make this video really quickly, because if you've been paying attention at all in the last week or two, you've seen How many stories are coming out of the billions of dollars that our government has spent on things that the average person in this country who pays taxes would never in a bajillion years support?
Because if you look at the waste and abuse that has run through USAID over the past several years, these are some of the insane priorities that organization has been spending money on.
USAID gave money to a transgender clinic in India.
$6 million to fund tourism in Egypt, $20 million on a new Sesame Street show in Iraq,
$70,000 for a production of a DEI musical in Ireland,
$4.5 million to combat disinformation in Kazakhstan,
$122 million of that to groups aligned with foreign terrorist organizations.
$47,000 for a transgender opera in Colombia,
$2 million for sex changes in Guatemala,
$32,000 for a transgender comic book in Peru. I don't know about you, but as an American taxpayer, I don't want my dollars going towards this crap.
Ever. Not ever. And it's not our representatives that are doing this. It's unelected bureaucrats, thousands upon thousands of people that no one ever voted for, making these kinds of decisions.
To include $168,000 contract for an Anthony Fauci exhibit at the National Institute of Health Museum.
And I've actually seen the phrase, no taxation without representation, making a comeback, and rightfully so. I think it's way past time we had these conversations, because the stuff that's coming out is freaking insane. But I thought everyone should see this so that you can understand, as an American, the level that we are at. Because I don't think a lot of people do. But here it is in black and white. This was in Reason a little over a week ago. The government says money isn't property, so it can take yours. Yay! In a jaw-dropping argument, the Department of Justice claims seizing $50,000 from a small business doesn't violate property.
I don't know, people. Is it the UT doing this? Or is it the internet?
And I'm just going to read this article. It says, as a lawyer who sues the government, you get used to the different kinds of arguments that government lawyers use to justify abuses of individual rights, sweeping claims of government power, bad faith, procedural obstacles, and more. This was a new one. The DOJ argued that confiscating $50,000 from a small business did not infringe on the business's right to private property because money is not property. Quote, money is not necessarily property for constitutional purposes, the government's brief declared. This is a legal brief, okay? Putting the very idea of property in square quotes. Reading at my desk, I practically fell out of my chair. The DOJ gave 3 rationales for the argument, all packed into a doorstopper of a footnote, and listen to the first 2. Number 1, the government creates money, so you can't own it. Because the government created it, you cannot own it. That's the first argument.
And that's incorrect. Government don't create money. The Federal Reserves create money. The Federal Reserve is its own entity. It's the bank, the banksters, the top dogs. 1912. Is it 1912? 1913. The same. It's not. The arrogance they have, demanding you to pay them money that's worthless, to turn around and use money that's worthless on something else. It's an illusion. And I say money because everybody's saying money. But lawful is gold and silver.
What can money be used for? What is money anyway? Not yours, bro. According to the Justice Department's lawyers, money is not necessarily property for constitutional purposes. And because the government creates money, you can't own it.
That's the first argument they're making. Number 2, the government can tax your money, so you don't own it. So the power to tax you means you don't own it.
Also, the government can tax your money, so you don't own it.
And number 3, the Constitution allows government to spend money for the general welfare. I don't even understand how the third one comes into this at all. Like, what does that have to do with ownership of...
So, and again, this is just my opinion. I'm arm length. The way I see this, since we don't have lawful money, okay, is the original intent. Congress, on a side note, was allowed to create some type of money exchange for the government body for another government body. But the people was supposed to still pay with gold and silver, with lawful money. It was supposed to be kind of like, let's just say, government private entity with private money to conduct their private businesses. You know, let's just keep it simple that way. Meanwhile, us, we're to use gold and silver, the lawful money, to conduct our business and our affairs in our lives and stay out of the person, fake entity that they, by bartered us, lied and cheated and stole from us.
money that someone earned because they have a business and they made $50,000. Like, what does the Constitution allowing the government to spend money for general welfare have to do with taking somebody's personal money? I don't even understand why that's thrown in. It just feels chucked on. Like, maybe it almost feels like this lawyer wrote this the same way, maybe say like an elementary school kid writes some homework at the last minute that they didn't even read the chapter and they just like turn it in just to have something in the hopes that the teacher grading it will only read the first few lines or something. I don't know, because this doesn't feel real. It says, if a libertarian was asked to write a satire of a government lawyer's brief, this is what they might come up with. But here it was in black and white. Whose money specifically was the government saying wasn't property? That of Chuck Sane, the owner of CS Lawn and Landscaping, a small landscaping business outside of Annapolis, which has been in operation for 40 years. Sane became a client of the Institute for Justice, which is a public interest law firm, when the federal government sought to impose over $50,000 in liability on his business through a trial, quote unquote, derisive air quotes, trial, held deep inside the bowels, I think he meant to write bowels, of a federal administrative agency. At said trial, both the prosecutor and the judge were employed by the same federal agency. So that's not really a trial, just by the way. That's not a fair and impartial trial if both the prosecutor and judge are employed by the same federal agency. That's called a snow job.
Members of the jury are dismissed.
So the Institute for Justice...
And I'm going to extend, if you ever watched Southern Draw Law, he did actually talked about how the Supreme Court is... or they're fighting into the Supreme Court about how the Fifth Circuit is using a particular type of doctrine that they only kind of look at the here and now. When the shooting occurred, but it doesn't look at what conspired to the shooting. And that way it covers the officers' liability drastically, okay? And the Fifth Circuit is all about officer safety, even though I'm a truck driver, and my job's more dangerous than theirs. So, Fifth Circuit, I need that liability of qualified immunity since my job is so dangerous.
Sued on Sane's behalf, arguing that before the government can impose that kind of liability, it has to provide a real trial before a real judge and jury. The specifics of what the government claims Sane did wrong, in short, arcane labor law, are beside the point. And at this point, I would argue, yeah, that's beside the point, because here we are at this moment. If the government wants to confiscate $50,000 from your business...
I'm going to extend one more thing. So while your time and labor is out there to take care of your household, but money is not your property, then won't that make you a slave? Just thinking.
You must have the chance to argue your defense to an impartial judge and jury, not an agency bureaucrat. And that should be basic, you know?
All right. So I talked too much on that one. Again, we're going to have to go with part 2. We're just going to do part 2 anyway. I'm here to say, for here and on the record, I am led to believe and do believe if that actually goes to the Supreme Courts, I'm willing to bet that they're going to be on the government side, and Institute for Justice is going to lose their case. And if that's the case, then everybody out there should know, quit working. You know, everybody just needs to quit and just shut the whole country down. Thank you, Supreme Court. I'm just saying, if you're out there working for nothing, by gosh, why are you working? You know, at minimum, why don't you go ahead and bring back the gold and silver? All right, these are We the People News. Bye.